Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are talking about one of the biggest, most epic stories ever told, the Trojan War. I mean, this is a tale of heroes, gods, and a city burning to the ground that people have been obsessed with for, almost 3,000 years? So, on the surface, the story seems pretty straightforward, right? A beautiful queen runs off with a handsome prince, and her husband launches 1,000 ships to get her back. But that's not the whole story, not by a long shot. So how does that, a single affair, spiral into a full-blown 10-year war that pulls in every major hero of the era? Well, the official reason was we have to go get Queen Helen back. But the real story, oh, it is so much messier and honestly so much more interesting. We're talking a divine beauty contest that goes horribly wrong, an unbreakable promise, and a family curse so dark it pretty much guaranteed a tragic ending. So let's dive in, starting with the spark that lit the whole thing on fire. Right, so the ultimate scandal. This whole massive conflict doesn't start on a battlefield. It starts at a wedding. And the weapon that kicks it all off isn't a sword or a spear. It's a piece of fruit. Yep, a single golden apple. This is the moment it all goes wrong. What's known as the Judgment of Paris. And it all begins with some classic, petty, divine jealousy. Eris, the goddess of discord, go figure, is furious that she wasn't invited to this big wedding. So she crashes it and tosses a golden apple onto the table that's inscribed to the fairest. Immediately, three of the most powerful goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, all say, well, obviously that's for me. They need a judge, so they pick a mortal, Paris, a prince of Troy, to decide. And this is where Troy's fate is sealed. Aphrodite offers him a bribe he just can't refuse, the most beautiful woman in the world if he picks her. And, well, what do you think he does? There was just one, tiny problem with Aphrodite's prize. The most beautiful woman in the world wasn't exactly available. Her name was Helen, and as the daughter of the god Zeus, her beauty was literally the stuff of legends. But she was already married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta. So when Paris sails to Sparta, and with a little help from Aphrodite, runs off with her, her husband doesn't just get mad. He calls in an army. A massive one. Which begs the question, how could one guy command so many other powerful kings? To really get the Greek side of this, you have to understand two key things. A binding promise made years before, and a family that was, to put it lightly, rotten right from its very beginning. So here's the deal. Before she ever married Menelaus, Helen had dozens of suitors. All these powerful kings and princes wanted to marry her. Her stepfather, being a pretty clever guy, saw this could easily start a massive war. So he made every single one of them swear a sacred oath, the oath of Tyndareus. They all had to promise, no matter who she chose, that they would band together to defend her marriage. So when Paris took Helen, Menelaus basically got on the phone and said, "Hey fellas, remember that oath? Time to honor it." And the man leading this huge army? None other than Menelaus' big brother, Agamemnon, the most powerful king in all of Greece. So you've got these two brothers in charge of the whole operation. And they just so happen to be the leaders of the most powerful and absolutely the most cursed family in the Greek world, the House of Atreus. You think your family has drama? This family's story is an absolute horror show of betrayal and murder passed down from one generation to the next. It all started with an ancestor named Tantalus, who decided it would be a good idea to serve his own son to the gods in a stew. Yeah, that act put a terrible curse on his entire family line, and his descendants just keep the horror going. So by the time Agamemnon and Menelaus inherit this curse, it's pretty much a given that their story is going to end in tragedy. In fact, just to prove the point, Agamemnon actually sacrifices his own daughter just to get favorable winds to sail to Troy. He's just another link in this doomed chain. Okay, so let's flip to the other side of the war. While the Greeks were haunted by this curse from their past, the Trojans were a powerful royal family whose fate would end up resting on the shoulders of two very, very different brothers. So let's break down the roster. For Team Greek, you've got the arrogant Agamemnon as the general manager, and their star player is Achilles, an basically unstoppable warrior. And in their corner are the goddesses Hera and Athena, who are still furious at Paris. Now, for Team Troy, they're led by the old king Priam, but the city's real protector is his oldest son, Hector. Hector is the ultimate hero, a noble family man who's fighting to save his home from a war his own brother started. He's like the conscience of Troy,
a huge contrast to Paris, whose selfish choice brought all this doom down on them. And of course, backing Paris is Aphrodite, who's kind of obligated to help him out.
And this is a really important thing to remember. This was never just a human conflict. The gods had picked their teams, and they were constantly interfering. Plus, the Greeks had a secret weapon who was pretty much a god himself. Seriously, all the squabbling on Mount Olympus played out directly on the battlefield. Hera and Athena were actively trying to destroy Troy just because Paris had hurt their pride. Aphrodite, on the other hand, was always swooping in to save Paris from certain death. And then you had other gods like Zeus, Apollo, and Poseidon all picking their favorite heroes, tipping the scales of battle back and forth. It was total chaos. But the biggest wildcard in the whole war was Achilles. Achilles' story is like this incredible drama of pride and rage happening right in the middle of the bigger war. There was a prophecy about him. He could either live a long, unknown life or die young and be famous forever. As the son of a goddess, he was the greatest fighter in the world, period. But his pride was just as legendary as his skill. When Agamemnon publicly insults him, Achilles just rage quits. He refuses to fight, and the Greeks almost lose the entire war because of it. The only thing that brings him back to the battle is pure grief and a desire for revenge after his closest companion, Patroclus, is killed by Hector. But even with all his power, Achilles was still mortal, and he's eventually killed by an arrow to his one vulnerable spot, his heel. So after 10 long, brutal years, the war finally ends, all thanks to the famous trick of the Trojan horse. But when the dust finally settles, there are no victory parades. Nobody is really celebrating. 10 years. For a decade, these two armies fought to a bloody stalemate. The war only ended with the complete and total annihilation of Troy. The city was burned to the ground, its men were slaughtered, and its women and children were taken into slavery. It was a devastating defeat. But for the victorious Greeks, the journey home was about to become just as deadly as the war itself. Winning this war did not mean a happy ending. Agamemnon comes home a hero, only to be murdered in his bathtub by his own wife, that family curse finally catching up to him. Odysseus, the brilliant mind behind the Trojan horse, ends up spending another 10 years lost at sea, fighting monsters and angry gods, and so many of the other Greek heroes either drown in storms on the way back or get home to find their kingdoms have completely fallen into chaos. When you get right down to it, this whole epic story is a tragedy. It's about the devastating cost of pride and rage for both the mortals who did the fighting and the petty gods who treated them like pieces in a game. It really shows you that even in victory, war leaves absolutely no one untouched. From the cursed king Agamemnon to the rage-filled Achilles to the doomed Prince Hector, the Trojan War is just this timeless collection of stories about deeply flawed, fascinating, and tragic people. It's a powerful reminder that behind every great conflict in history, there are always these personal dramas that are driving everything. So, what should we explain next?